Hi, everyone. A very good morning to all of you. Thank you so much for joining me today for today's session of Chai with Viji. There are a lot of new people, a lot of old friends, and welcome. Welcome to this community that it's been a pleasure to create. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Viji, and I'm an Ayurvedic practitioner, and I have a small healthcare practice called Divine Journey, where I help women to consciously understand and approach their health and their bodies. But every first Sunday of the month, I have these sessions. It's at 9 a.m. And, we cover various topics related to our bodies and our health. Today's topic, we're going to be looking at family dynamics through a very unique lens. All of us, by the very fact that we're alive, right, have relationships. And oftentimes we may have asked the question, like, why is this particular relationship so difficult? And specifically, even those of us who have siblings, how can two people born from the exact same parents feel like they're living completely different lives? Because theoretically, they are influenced by the same parents. And so in the Vedic tradition, we think about inheriting more than just physical qualities from our parents. We talk about inheriting ancestral currents. So we refer to this oftentimes as karma. And today we'll talk about it through the lens of both Ayurveda and Jyotish. So Ayurveda looking at the biology side, and then Jyotish looking at the ancestral architecture. And so hopefully by the end of today, my goal is for you to move, or all of us really, to begin to move from this feeling of, oh, this is how my relationship is, a feeling of, reaction, to one where we understand how, the infrastructure is set up for our unique lives, and how perhaps understanding that can help you to create a transformation, not necessarily in the relationship itself, but the way that you look at it. Why is what we're talking about even important? Right? And so the idea is that, some of us, we may be in the phase of our life where we're looking to conceive. And so we may be thinking about the child that we are going to conceive. And obviously at some point there is that relationship that you're going to form. Some of us, already have kids. And so we may be thinking about the relationship that we have with them and, and how to navigate that. But all of us are here today because we are born from somebody. And so we absolutely have a relationship with our parents, whether it be present or even absent. And so how can we understand these relationships and move through life with more grace? So when we experience relationships, they can be of various types. You could be in a family dynamic where you see two siblings who have the same parents. One might feel, happy and at peace and connected with their parents, and the other a little bit disconnected. Or you're the parent who pours everything into their child only to be met with sometimes disdain or, some kind of friction, and you're confused and you're feeling down. Or you are the child of somebody who you feel extremely close with, right? But you're feeling pulled in certain directions, and you're trying to navigate what you're feeling with what you need to do with your life and how that relationship is with your parents. We all know the relationships that we have either with our child or with our parent. How do we navigate these relationships and their dynamics? So if we are at a place, for example, where we're thinking about conception, then we need to really understand about creating that relationship in the first place, right? And so these are the tools that both Ayurveda and Jyotish bring. But there is also a part of all of us. We already have these existing relationships, either, with our parents or with our children. And so understanding them is definitely going to be important, because finally, with the tools hopefully that we will be discussing today, we may be able to transform that relationship. And like I said, not necessarily the relationship itself, but how we relate to that dynamic. When we looking at how a relationship is created, and in this way, actually the birth of an individual. And so if you're looking to conceive, Ayurveda has not only an unbelievable perspective, but tools. And this is done through practices or a philosophy called Saṁskāra. And essentially, the importance given to the mother's physical, mental state as a sacred vessel. And so it's so important to understand that the soul doesn't just enter the body, it enters a field. And that field is going to be prepared by the mother and the mother's body and the environment that is around her. So the first and most important thing is to create that conscious environment. So it's about being intentional when we kind of arrive or begin our process of conception. The second is to really pay attention to all of the things that are affecting, this environment. And I often tell all my clients, so it's everything: the music you listen to, the weather, the people that you interact with, the foods that you eat, the activities that you do. These are all important and build that sensory field for that child, which will eventually build their nervous system. And then finally, all of these inputs, the mental, the physical, the relational inputs that happen have to be metabolized by that mother, right, to create the field. And so that metabolism gives rise to an essence that both in Ayurveda and Jyotish we call Rasa. Another word for Rasa is flavor. And it's really relating to the environment that that child is going to be impacted by. And when we realize this, we realize that we're not just waiting for a relationship to happen. We have agency, we have influence over, how we can actively participate in creating this future relationship. When we talk about Garbha Saṁskāra, there are so many things that we can do. I think what I want to share, for people who are at that stage, right, is that there are so many influences that we have in our life, but it is just important, to be mindful of what we can control and absolutely, do our best. So how come we're talking about conception or pregnancy? Because this is really where relationship is established, right? And so it's important to understand how it's established so that we can influence it. If we in the future will know, somebody, our family member. And one other part of this is that all of these principles apply to any creation that we are going to endeavor upon. So continuing from what I just said, understanding how nourishment is used to create the body of the individual and then therefore later on the relationship. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, right, the food that we eat is understood not just to be calories or have labels, carbohydrates, fats, proteins, all of that, right? It is the physical medium through which our body is created. And in Ayurveda, there is 6 different tastes of the food that we put in our body, Shad Rasa. And so these 6 tastes are contained in the food, and they are going to be broken down in our body in order to create it. But a side note that I want to share. So it's important to understand a few things. Everybody just focuses on the fact that things need to be organic. But more than organic, right? What we need to understand, how is this food going to interact with our body? What are the qualities of the food? And that's where these rasas or tastes come in. But also, are they compatible with our own constitution, our own structure? And then finally, what is really important to also understand is that if we intake food that the body is unable to break down, it is then unable to utilize it. It is then unable to integrate it and create our bodies. So it's just important to pay attention that it's not just eating organic food, but to understand the quality of the food, the quality of our body. This is where self-awareness is so very important. So then as we eat the food, right, this is what then gets metabolized into this amazing essence that I said before is called Rasa in Ayurveda. And this very building block, right, ends up creating every tissue in our body, from plasma, which is also called Rasa Dhatu, or the plasma tissue, all the way to our Shukra Dhatu, or our reproductive tissue. So what we put in our body creates every single organ, tissue, everything in our body. So when we talk about the essence of a relationship, it's not just metaphor, right? Because it starts right here where the literal nourishment that we are putting in our body is the foundation. It's unbelievably powerful. I love this image. Because as you can see here, right, the child is not just a physical creation, but even if you look physically, you'll see that from the essence of both mother and father, right, arrive the child. And so depending upon where we're at, that's the energetic profile, that's the tone profile that the baby is going to have. So your physical, your emotional, your energetic state is going to literally build the foundation for your creation. And then the tone of the relationship also is going to be emerging of both parents. Now, in the image, I actually wish I drew an image of two different, one that's all yellow and one that's slightly colored, because the truth is it's about how we both show up for that exchange. And so again, the child enters a home that's pre-prepared by the specific taste or rasa of both parents. And so this is where the architecture starts. Now, conception isn't random. And so this talk is based on the philosophy and the background of the Vedic sciences. And so here, we don't arrive in a blank slate. So we arrive with a bank account of experiences, of lessons called karma. And there are different names for it, but what I want you to walk away with is, as you're born, you bring a portion of that bank account with you. That is what we call karma, for you to work out with your family, with your lineage. And so as you go through life, you may accumulate more karma in your actions. But this is why birth and conception isn't random, because there is a particular karma that one needs to fulfill. And we choose our parents as the environment to fulfill that karma. So now we can kind of shift from Ayurveda a little bit to Jyotish, because it allows us to actually see what karma is there and how that karma will map out to the experience that we have. So the birth chart is understood as the foundation. So it is the map of our individual lives. It will share with us how we interact with the world, etc. From it, right, comes two other charts, and this is what we're going to focus on today. All I want you to know is that basically the idea is that there is a map that shares insight into the karma or experience that we're going to be living in this life. And that's the birth chart. There are other charts that show two very important things that we're going to be talking about today. The D7, that is going to talk about our relational flavor that we have with our creation, our children, and with our parents, our family. And then there is one more chart, because we need basically a context, and this chart refers to the lineage. So as I talked about before, we are also inheriting ancestral karma or ancestral stories. And so the D12 is a chart that gives us insight into that inherited role. And so what happens when we have a particular relational energetic profile and we have a particular inherited role or structure that we're given, and what if they're not compatible? This is the foundation for how relationships are understood.
I have a question, Viji.
Yes.
So the inherited karma from our ancestors or from our lineage is from the lifetime that we're in right now.
So very good question. So let me quickly go back to this previous slide. So there is a particular amount of karma based on all of the lifetimes that we have lived. So that's like our bank account. Now, when we're born, it's like we take a little bit from that, big pot, and that's what this birth chart here shows. When we're born, it shows the portion of that larger bank account that we bring into this life to experience, to live out.
So I understand that. I guess my question is more about how we have this karma or lineage in this lifetime that we're in now.
Yes.
And we also enter into different lives and enter like a different lineage. And so I'm just wondering how that meshes together.
Maybe the confusion arises out of the fact that, if we've had many lifetimes, there are many lineages or families that we are a part of, right? And so the chart that we have for this lifetime, and that's based on your, your birth, your date of birth, time of birth, place of birth, so that unique moment that you came into this world, then it's just the karma, it's the inherited ancestral karma that you're meant to experience in this life, that you're meant to hold in this life. So it can't be that we simultaneously experience like every single thing. But the truth is this: in this 1 hour chai with Viji, all of Jyotish, all of these charts, all of relationship is not going to completely make sense. I think it's just important for us to understand that there is a reason why we feel what we feel. When you understand kind of even from not the chart itself, but you understand, oh, wow, what my chart is showing actually, it vibrates with what I'm experiencing, then there's an understanding that this has come not out of something personal, but out of something, by the nature of our experience of being born. And then we can start to implement things that will help us to navigate that. Okay. So,
Viji, can I ask a question?
absolutely.
Hi, this is Kira. Thank you so
Hi,
much.
Kira.
Hi, everyone. So Viji, when we're looking to conceive and we're considering the birth charts, is it like all of the charts, the mother, the father, and the baby's charts are all equally at play here, or is there one that's like more of consideration?
So you bring up a good point. So when someone is trying to conceive, we're looking at a chart called the conception chart or Adana chart. And the time of intercourse when egg and sperm unite is a chart that actually shares the intention of the soul that is about to, enter the mother's womb. So from that chart, then every other chart basically, arrives, right? And so that chart is based on, the conception. Then when a child is born, that's when they've actually gone from being a soul or atma in the mother's body, then as a physical being having a physical experience in the world. And so it's based on the birth chart of the individual that arises these relational charts of D7 and D12.
Okay,
Right?
got it. And so
Everything is based on the birth. Yeah.
And so we're looking at two different charts. One is the conception chart, and then one is the actual birth chart. And okay, great. This is amazing, actually. Okay, so just very quickly, I'll share. A few months ago in a dream, like in the middle of the night, I was kind of in a liminal state, and I received very clearly like the timing to conceive the baby and the timing of the birth, but it does not match with what is feasible for us to do. So that's really interesting that you're saying the baby has like certain, so anyways, I'm curious like how to deal with that, but that might not be on this call. That might be another personal chat.
Yeah, that's an absolutely great point. I mean, this is very intricate and very heavy, and so I'm jumping into topics that are very advanced, and so that's why more than explanation of how these charts come about or how to like actually interpret them in its very granular form, I just want to share that there is an impact of what we do before we conceive, because that actually, creates a cascade of events that then gives us the time of our birth. And then from there, right, by the very fact that you're born and you have this birth chart, a lot of other charts are simultaneously created. You wouldn't create them. There are softwares that give them to you. But these slices of this birth chart, show various aspects of our life, relationships with partners, relationships with parents, relationships with children, and various other aspects of life. And so you saw on the other slide about how the body had the physical nourishment, right? This nourishment, and this is in that D7 chart, the first chart, this chart, not coincidentally, refers to 7 different flavors of the environment in the womb when a baby is gestating. For the sake of just kind of giving you exposure to the amazingness that is the Vedic sciences, and also how we can have a beacon to live our life, I want to introduce what in Jyotish is the 7 rasas of this chart. It is that environment in our mother's womb that has created a certain predominance of a certain flavor or a certain rasa. And it generally kind of gives you the climate, the relational climate that exists between you and your parents. So the first one is called kshara, and kshara in Sanskrit means saline water or salt. If you think about salt, it has the quality of being sharp, abrasive, it can sting. So when you have this rasa, it's more of like a polishing emotional feel. And so it's a relationship that could be defined by discipline, by correction, these kind of things. So then we have kshira, or milk. And milk, if you think about it, the mother's milk, it's very nourishing, it's soft, it's cooling. And this kind of embodies a more like cradling bond. And these are words that I actually put just so that we can conceptually attach an understanding of these different flavors in our mind. And so the experience of this milk-related rasa is one like that's very foundational. Again, think about a mom and giving milk to her baby. It's about support, receiving, our basic needs, and it's met without friction, just a very easy passage of nourishment. The next one is madhya, and madhya is alcohol. And it's more of an enmeshed relationship. So think about how we feel when we're intoxicated and we're just like enamored, with everything. And in this case, where both parent and child have a very strong bond. The thing about alcohol, though, is it can actually blur our vision as well, right? So boundaries between the desire of the parent, the desire of the child is a bit blurred. So, one can be very, very invested in the relationship and not be able to separate themselves from either the parent or the child. Then we have grita, or ghee, and this is a relationship that is what I refer to as guided. So if you think even in Ayurveda, ghee has this amazing quality to be able to go in the body wherever it is needed. Ghee also is a very refined process to make ghee. And so there's a lot of intentionality with this relationship, clear, and there's a very specific direction. So again, there's a reason why all of these names, our ancient seers had actually applied all of these names to these particular relational flavors, because it helps us to understand what type of connection that we have. Now with dadi, or yogurt, this is a relationship that's cultivated because it takes time to make yogurt, right? It has to boil the milk, you seed it a little bit, and then you have to let it sit, and you have to wait until it forms. And so it's about a relationship that, may take time to develop. Then we have something called ikshurasa, or sugarcane juice. And so this is a relationship that's definitely sweet, but it takes effort to acquire that sweetness, right? So if you think about sugarcane, it's really, really hard. Recently, I went to India and I had amazing sugarcane juice. So there's a very hard shell and you have to grind it. And then eventually that very tasty and sweet juice comes out. So this is a relationship that's structured around effort and eventually getting that sweetness. And then Shuddha Jala is pure water. And so it is something, if you think about what, pure water is it's clear. And so it's a mirror. And so it's about a bond where, both parent and child can allow the space for both people to understand each other and see them for who they are.
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
So in this chart, is it showing your relationship both with like your parents and your children?
Yeah, so D7 is related to our children and our creation, but it's also the way that we embody our relational nature. Because it's how we approach the relationship as a child, these are also the prevalent ways in which I would approach kind of different things in my life. So it's that kind of emotional tone that I would have.
So Viji, all of these different rasas, are they primarily determined by the timing itself?
Absolutely. When you're born, based on the date, time, and place of your birth, a chart can be made.
What do we do with that? Like, since it sounds like it's sort of in a certain way, like a little bit predetermined, is there something that in certain cases we would do something to balance it, or things like that. Like, what do we basically do when we have the information?
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is a perfect context. That's the point of this entire talk. And so, yes, I think that someone else also asked, is it possible to change the relationship? So, this is the foundation of the building, of the experience and the building that we have come, to this life with. And so I would actually then mirror back a few questions to all of you. And that is that, when you say, are we able to change it? Then there's an immediate kind of feeling like something is wrong with any one of these flavors, right? And so the idea is that when we understand how we approach our relationships, what the relationship is asking out of us, then we may choose then to respond differently. Right? Because oftentimes, we think certain things are bad, and then therefore that creates a certain perspective, that creates a certain response, that creates a certain feeling, and then it's a cycle. So do we just say, well, oh man, this is the type of relationship that's there? My argument and the whole point of today's talk is that I think this information should empower us to say, well, wait a minute, what is there something I can do? And for me, I think it's about changing perspective. I've implemented the same philosophy in my own life, and it's helped me tremendously. And I'll talk about that. So let's try to understand, right, how this works. So first of all, we're looking at the birth chart. And in the birth chart, it's very small, but you will see that there are planets. Because what this birth chart does is it maps the exact position of all of the planets in the sky at the time of your birth, where they are, which constellation, etc., exact degrees. And these planets are basically mirrors of certain energies in our lives. There's 7 planets and 2 nodes of the moon. These are the players in our chart. And so think about these planets, right, that have roles that are then going to be filtered through this wheel, this Rasa wheel. Okay? So this Rasa wheel then becomes a filter. So the planets actually have representations of different parts of our life. The moon is related to our mind, our mother. Sun is also our relationship with our father. So there's different meanings of these planets. Right now, that's actually not important, right? But what is important is that when they're in the chart, the calculation is done, and there are flavors associated with each one of these planets, which is then filtered, and that then gives the understanding on all these levels, the different relational flavors that these particular indications have. So what I want you to understand is that when we look at a chart, we will see rasas, these relational flavors associated with certain planets. And that will give us a weather map on the indications of those planets and what they mean, in our lives. So basically what happens is these rasas filter the experience that we have, whether it be of our mother, whether it be of our father, whether it be of our siblings, or the energy that we have, our intellect, our wisdom, our relationships with partners, or the work that we do. These are all the indications of these planets. Confused?
Yes, I'm confused.
Okay, tell me where you're confused.
So, is every rasa related to a planet, or is just like every planet can mix with every rasa?
Got it. So remember, they're not random. There are 7 rasas, okay? And each planet will have 1. And that is determined by the birth chart again. So there will be no calculation that we do. When you look at a chart, and I will show you. So this is my chart. And I'm moving ahead a little bit, but so you have the 7 planets and the 2 nodes like I talked about. Here are the planets. And the chart itself will tell you, right? So this is yogurt. So my ascendant, which talks about my physical body, is yogurt in nature. My sun is in the sugarcane. My moon is in clear, pure water. And so what'll be important is if you think about the moon related to our emotions, our mother, our heart. So then we can start to look at the flavor that we bring into that. So you asked me how it's done. At the time of our birth, every planet is already associated with a flavor, and that's given. So why that flavor is associated, that's because the answer that I'm going to give you in one word, that's your karma. All right, so we are back here, right? And so because each of the planets that represents different things, like I mentioned, is going to be filtered through one of these and really assigned, if you will, one of those flavors, then it results in various different types of relationship based on that rasa. That is all I would love for you to get from this slide. Remember, we're not going to understand everything, but it's, it starts from what we do, creates our body, then creates the time of birth, and the karma that we're going to experience. And Jyotish gives us the tools to be able to understand, oh, wow, so we walk into this life with certain energetic profiles related to our interactions and the relationships that we have. And the proof is in the pudding, right? So when you look at your own chart, you can start to say, oh, wow, that makes sense. Or, it doesn't. And then you can begin to understand why. Now that we've talked about how relationship feels, okay, we're going to talk about how relationship functions. So there's another chart, that D12 chart, and that talks about more specifically about relationship dynamics. And the relationship dynamics comes from that ancestral inheritance. Okay, so I want you to think of this as like the structural blueprint of the family. So every planet, okay, in the chart stands on one of 4 pillars that I'm going to talk about. First one, the pillar's name is Ganesha. The second pillar, Ashwini Kumaras. With Ganesha, it's about an identity that's rooted, a sense of belonging. If someone identifies with Ganesha, then the role in terms of ancestry, in terms of lineage, in terms of family, is to maintain those roots. So it's like a basic sense of security in the family line. Ashwini Kumaras. So this Ashwini Kumaras are about integration. It's about healing. It's about having a role in the family to potentially repair connections, to bring balance in connections, potentially at times where things break down. It's about, having a connection to both your mom and your dad and trying to, maintain that connection and feel supported. Okay, the third, Yama. So Yama is about boundaries. And the role here, in terms of ancestral lineage, is to hold the rules, hold discipline, and keeping structure of the family together. This will all make sense in just a second, okay? And the last pillar is called Ahi Sarpa. So Ahi Sarpa is about truth. It's about bringing a wisdom to the family lineage that may be outside of your family, so that the lineage itself can evolve. And it's so depthful because, let me tell you, it sounds so great, but somebody who has a predominance of this Ahi Sarpa, imagine that you are here to elevate your family's lineage, right? To share wisdom, to give truth. Well, what if your family is like, what is that? I have no idea what you're talking about, and so that is actually part of the energetics of this pillar, which we will go into. They're pillars for a reason. They're very depthful. So there are so many aspects of all of these pillars, which we're not going to cover every single aspect today. But I want to give you a sense of basically the structure, because it's so easy then for you to learn about what these are. But when you understand that you then come and become transposed upon like an architecture, then you can start to understand, oh, wow, okay, so this is kind of the dynamics. How do I live with and manage these dynamics? But the way that the ancient seers gave this naming system is it's related to the mythological stories in the Vedic tradition. So if you're interested at all, I would go and research more about it, because then you'll get a greater depth, because it's a story. It's a story of a lifetime, right? And so there's so many intricate layers of that. going back, Ganesha, you all would have heard, he's the remover of all obstacles, but he was created from his mother to protect his mother. And he was initially unknown to his father. And Ganesha was the guardian for his mother. So when somebody has this energy that's predominant, they will have a deep loyalty to their mother, right? And you will feel like you're the protector, of your family. And of course, like initially what happened to Ganesha as he was guarding his mother's chamber was his father came and said, hey, like this is my chamber. And he's like, I don't know you. I'm here to protect my mother. And so she has told me that nobody can come in. And there's a long story related to that where his father gets, angry with him, like, hey, this is my wife. I should be allowed in this chamber. And he chops off the head of this child. And that is where his mother, Parvati, got very upset. And Ganesha's mother got very upset. Like, how could you have, killed my son? And she was in utter sadness. And then so Shiva went and he cut off the head of an elephant and put it on Ganesha's body. And this is why Ganesha is represented by the elephant head. All of that to say, I'm not, every story we're not going to go over today, but the origin story gives us an idea of the energy of the lineage that, we come from. So having said that story, then we'll go on to the next one. So Yama was born to the sun, and he's born to a very powerful father, but he had the life where he had to forge his own path. Right. And so he also had a feeling of rejection from, the mother. And so for Yama or Yama type lineages, it's one that respects rules. It respects authority. And because he needed to create his own identity, that type of energy is going to be present. For Ashwini Kumaras, this is about the story of two twin horses that were born into balance, but they had to work hard to get respect, to prove their worth. And so that type of energy and that type of life experience is what comes with this ancestral inheritance. And so they were also the healers. So they will feel like they have a stable base, which is their parents who supported them and created them, but they may feel like they need to earn respect or support, from others. And then finally, Ahisarpa, who essentially in the origin story is a serpent who felt abandoned and felt like there was a lot of conflict in his family and felt that nobody understood him. And he was praying and praying and praying, and he was very sad. So he's just praying like, how come I feel so alienated from my family? Eventually, through his prayers, he was given a very divine status. And so the idea is that this is a lineage, and an energy where one may feel like they're different than their family, their parents. They may feel like they're left behind. But as they go on a deeper quest, then it will lead them to a higher purpose. And so this was the one where I shared with you that the existence of such a pillar happens so that we are able to take our lineage into a different path. But in order to do that, we have to tread the path that's unknown or not known. And, we may feel friction from those who don't understand. So now I'm going to come back and hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense. Let's come back to the 3 relationships that we spoke about earlier, okay? So this is related to the family who has 2 children, obviously the same parents. Here is where we can begin to understand why the children have a different experience from their parents, because obviously they were born at different times, right? And at different places, etc. So child A in the D7 has, and this is the child on the left, right, is born in the Madhya Rasa or the alcohol Rasa. So they are feeling like so, connected to and in touch with their parents, and, whatever they do, they love what their parents do. It's a very, connected in that way. And then Ganesha in the D12, talks about a relationship where they want to maintain those roots. They want to maintain that connection, right? That's very important to them. So that relationship is going to feel very good to that child because that's the energy profile. Whereas then the other child, right? Their D7 was the salt rasa. the kshara rasa. And so they're going to feel this kind of emotional sense of difference and, a little bit cutting. And on top of that, if they're born in D12 with Ahi Sarpa, then they have to forge a different path. So not only do they have to forge a different path and they're different than, their parents, but they also are experiencing that with that salted feeling, right? So they're hurt. They're hurt by it. They're angry by it. And so I want to bring in something because you guys are saying, well, what do we do, with this? Now, this is just one, permutation. Let's say that this child was born with Madhya, same as child A, but their ancestral lineage that they have inherited was different than their brother, right? So they're feeling so connected to their parents. At the same time, they also are feeling that they need to do something different. They don't jive with how their parents are, living or how their parents conduct themselves or what they believe in, all of that. They have their own view. So that's going to be a situation where they're going to internally feel pulled. In this situation, they're feeling like, man, like what's going on? I'm not happy about this. This is not fair. So it's just giving an explanation first. I'm not giving any solutions, just giving an explanation of why we have these different experiences. The second one is a parent, right, that we talked about. The parent they feel they're giving everything to the child, but then they're met with this friction. So, and then you see in this top part that the parent is also fighting with the child. So in this case, right, the parent feels that they're giving their love through discipline. I'm teaching you. I'm telling you what to do, and you have to follow the rules, but you have to follow the rules because they're so important. Why don't you understand? And then the child, if you think about it, if they are even from if they have a different D12, right? Their thing was, wait, I need to forge my own path. This is where the friction arises. And in this last case, you'll see that the child and the parents, they do have a great relationship. And you see more in this picture that the child is really feeling bad, really feeling guilty about the fact that they have, desires. You see in this picture of going out and, and maybe doing like a different job than their parents wanted them to do. They're not going to run the family business. They're going to, they're going to become an Ayurvedic practitioner. And that the parents are like, I don't understand. We're so in tune with each other, but why are you doing, something different? And the child then also feels, that sense of guilt. I have this pull to do something different, but I also love my parents. How am I going to make those two gel and merge? For me, the reason why I, decided to do this talk in the first place was because I really do believe that with understanding that comes from self-awareness, then we can utilize tools to be able to then shift. Again, I don't think we can shift the relationship because that's what we were born with. That's the karma that we're born with, if we believe in that. I think that what we can do is recontextualize the hardwiring that, that is part of that karma. And so, I think that, again, we have to acknowledge it. We consult the blueprint to understand, right? So I think first it's like, and I've gone through this process myself in my own life. I know how I feel, and then I also can, nobody has to show you a chart for you to experience what you experience, in terms of relation, right? But then as I learned Jyotish and understood, oh, wow, this is the background, that's when, we can refine what I call the mediator, and that mediator is us, right? And so in terms of this family, if there is an understanding based on knowing that, then we can honor the fact that, hey, like these two children have different purposes in this world. And so then for the child here that's upset, that's salty, potentially what we can do, right, is cool that friction. And so this is where the tools of Ayurveda, lifestyle, diet, practices will come in so that they can get to a place where that maybe they can cool that salty nature that they're experiencing and even like other things like herbs to basically reshift the pattern of the nervous system. Because, for example, we all would have experienced anxiousness anger, depression, all of these emotions, right? And then how do we get out of that? Well, those are the tools that I believe if we use on a consistent level, that is what allows us to shift that vibration. And so in the second one, the parent itself, right, if you remember, was, I believe, Yama. So strict, these are the rules. And so the parent herself could maybe understand, oh, well, this is the way I am. I can still fulfill that role of, giving boundaries, but maybe I can do it in such a way that will create stability, right? And so it's a shift in the way that we think, and it's a shift in the way that we can behave while still fulfilling that karma. And so again, there are practices that we can do. And the idea really is to, in some ways, and maybe this is the Ayurvedic practitioner in me speaking, to bring that rasa all to some kind of form of ghee where, we kind of refine ourselves and we do the work so that we can kind of clearly facilitate the karma that we need to fulfill, but do it in a way that doesn't cause us strain. And then finally, in this case, use our discernment, use our mind to separate. Like in this case, this was the child who had one part of being very connected to his parents, right? And the other part of his own sense of duty of following another path. So we need to, what is important to do is to separate. I can still be, connected to my parents, show them love, all of that, but I can also then follow my own path. And so those, need to be separated. So this is where these practices come in. And so there's a practice of Trataka, which is about a focus on a particular object. And so why I even brought this in is because the practices that we think that I tell my clients or that we hear about are just so esoteric. They're not. They are ways in which we cultivate an energetic patterning in our body and in our minds. So when we practice things like focusing on an object, then we practice that ability to focus so that we can say, I'm going to focus on the path. And so that's very important. I can also still have the relationship. And so, we can do it also with other things that we eat and we intake and things like that. So the bottom line, right, is that we can't change the stars, but we can change the perspective from where we are looking. Right? And so when we recognize that this is the hardwiring, we can choose not to react to that flavor, but then we honor the karma or the architecture that we have to fulfill. Okay, so in terms of, meeting that karma in the best way, like I said, we want to separate the flavor from fact. So what do I mean by that? I mean that there is a flavor, so, any flavor, like if I say the word purple, there are many shades of purple, right? So I think it's important for us to create that discernment on what shade of that flavor that we can embody. And then definitely honoring, the ancestral script. Going with the flow is what is going to give you less pain. Same thing in labor, by the way. And then we can transform the mediator and have a better experience. So there are tools that we can use, right? And these tools, basically, what do they do? It's not just, I didn't just put it here for the sake of putting it. Again, it cultivates an internal, not only energy, but an ability to be able to step back and look at this differently than we are we are the experience completely. Doing things that are going to affect the mind, the body, and the spirit, and that's through, daily practice. Then making sure that we have people that support us in this understanding, because when you feel supported, then you can be constantly reminded, yes, I'm not the experience that I'm experiencing. Obviously, then also realizing that we all have a chart, we all have a flavor that we come into and a mindset, we all have an ancestral pulling and calling. And so to show forgiveness and compassion to everyone in our lives, because we're all dealing with the same thing. And we can do this obviously through Ayurveda. If you are looking at your own chart, I would say let's start off with the big three. That is your ascendant. It's the point in your first house that determines your entire chart. And so look at it in this way, right? So the ascendant shows the tone of your life, Am I going to be meeting things from that kind of polished perspective, that more nurturing perspective, whatever it may be, those flavors related to the D12? What role were you here to hold, right? For you and your family. And then the moon, which will be related to your mind. So that'll help you to see how you kind of respond to things, your relationship dynamic, how it's related to you feeling safe and cared for, as well as the emotional climate, and then also the sun. So these three that you should start off with, that helps you to understand the big high level parts of your charts. So going back to mine, I just wanted to quickly share something with you, and then I'll take questions and comments. So this is my chart, but again, if I were to do the same thing I just told you, as I mentioned earlier, right? In terms of my physical life and intellect, always I have felt in my life that I had to kind of forge my own path. I'm very different than everyone in my family. I used to think it was a bad thing. So this is where I wanted to kind of share. I used to think like, my God, like I'm so different. Do I have to fight? Why am I so different? And I think initially I did fight. So that is the karma I came in with. But I don't have to see it as something that, is negative. And I think that I did. And what happened coincidentally over time, right? So dadi is yogurt. So it's about how things take time to progress. It takes time. And so for me, my own experience has been that, yes, I've had to be different, not be the engineer, not be the lawyer, not take the, path that was already really, I think on some level expected of me, but forge my own. But over time, not only did I understand how to relate to my family, and it took time. I'm 51, so it took a while, and I learned Jyotiṣa only in the last decade. So that's where it taught me to kind of see things in a different way. So rather than approach it like by being upset or disappointed, it's that, oh wow, this is the path I'm meant to go on. I just wanted to say one more thing. See, for me, the pull is that both my sun and my moon, my mind, is related to that family connection. It's very important to me to protect my family. And so there was a little bit of conflict. I have this feeling like I want to be a part of my family, but at the same time, I'm pulled in a different direction. So this is the way to begin to understand. I don't want to stop sharing. I want to share one more thing, you guys. The whole reason why I do all of this is because I want to share with everybody a different way of looking at these sciences, to use these sciences to really learn about ourselves. And when we learn about ourselves, you don't need me or anyone else. You can use that knowledge to help yourselves to understand your relationships, and then you yourself can find the tools, if you want, to heal yourself, to heal those relationships, and to heal your perspective. And on April 19th, I am releasing my third book, which is called Your Body's Journey. And it is about a lot of what we talked about today. It's about the journey of how we come into the world, all the way from conception to postpartum. I will stop sharing and happy to chat if anyone else wants to ask questions or has comments.
Hey, Viji.
Hey.
Hi. I don't know if this was covered or if I missed it, but is there a way to look at our own chart and calculate what pillar I belong to, or what rasa?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So there are online chart calculators. Okay. And in those, I believe you will be able to, look up what are called Varga charts or divisional charts. And so you'll want to see what that D7 and D12 is. But since you're here, if you message me, info@divinejourney.me, I will create your chart and send it to you so that you can look and you don't need to do that. I wanted to offer to people who attended today is that if you buy my book on Amazon when it comes out and you just email me, show me that you purchased it, then I will give you 50% off a session with me where we can go over this and talk about your relationships and even the things that you can do to heal or to change that perspective. It's not a one and done kind of thing. This is our lifetime path that we go through, but it's a start.
Thank you so much.
Awesome, Viji.
Thank you, Karen.
This is great.
Thank you for your time. It's a great topic.
Oh, you're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Can I ask something really quick, Viji?
Absolutely.
It's just about siblings.
Okay, yes.
So, like, how does your relationship with your sibling play into all of this?
How does your relationship with your sibling play into this? Well, I'm going to answer it in two ways. So, I'm just showing you literal slices, right? Like we are multidimensional beings. So for many of these dimensions, there's a chart for it. D7 is a relationship that you have with your parents as a result of their own union. And then D12 is ancestry, that lineage that comes in. For me, my relationship with my parents is very different than my sister's relationship with them. And I think that their relationship with both of us are different. And I think it is so easy, because I did it most of my life, is to be like, why is it different? That's not fair. And one other thing that I think most people do is connect it to love. And I really wanted to mention that because we do, because oftentimes that's our own lens of how we want to feel and be loved. So I think with this understanding, then you can really, again, you take a step back. So I might feel a certain way, but I have to tell myself that while I feel this way, it's because that's why I'm hardwired. However, I can take a step back and understand that there's a different way in which they show love, or and I have to understand that they're not equivalent. They're not mutually exclusive. But this was a great source of healing for me, and I think this is what I really do believe is a great platform for healing for all. Yeah, Isabel.
I wanted to say, sorry, I wanted to say that the perspective you shared today was so healing and refreshing, because I think growing up in the Western society, it's all about having this good, close relationship with your parents. And I feel like the Western perspective is so one-dimensional. And this is how I perceive it. And that there's this one ideal relationship. And now hearing this, different pillars and different tastes, it's just so refreshing. And so it's just all about feeling what is reality and seeing what is reality, and not thinking about, oh, I should have this most beautiful relationship with my parents, and if they care, then this is what they show and this is how they act. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Viji. This has been amazing. I wanted to ask you, so remember how at the beginning you introduced this idea of creating the relationship, and to look back at the term Grabha, Saṁskāra.
Yeah, Grabha was
And so is it mostly kind of what we're actively doing, or is there also some play of our own chart? I mean, probably there's interplay of our own charts of the mother and the father. So how does that, how do our charts play into what's created, the essence that's created?
You began to actually ask one question and then went into another. So I want to answer both. The idea is that why it is written in Ayurvedic texts to mindfully conceive, to prepare our body, to prepare our mind, is so that we create the best possible environment. The chart itself, our own chart, does have an energetic profile. So it does govern. It gives us insight into how we react, how we approach things, what are our relationships. So in that way, it's almost like we're hardwired in a certain way, but we obviously have the ability to rewire.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And if we want to read the book, I guess you'll send an announcement, or
I'll send an announcement. It's being released on April 19th. It will be available on Amazon as an ebook, as a paperback.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.